Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today, our commander is the Maelstrom Wanderer, a titanic walking storm of living magic that is, as described in its original art brief, purposeless and ceaseless. What a cool line. Thanks to Jacob Levy 6576 for requesting this commander. The Maelstrom was a massive, crackling whirlpool of pure magical energies at the point where the 5 shards of Alara merged, and the Wanderer was spawned from that Maelstrom. It continues to, wander through that area, pulsing with a core of intense energy and towering over the landscape as if in search of the mana and ether from which it emerged. We don't have any real lore for the Maelstrom Wanderer, but I like to think that it may become important if or when we return to Alara one day. This is a pretty popular commander, and I'm excited to share what I put together for it. But before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why it's such a cool card and why I put it at the head of my deck. So I take about 30 cards and put them toward doing whatever my commander wants me to do. This is our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. 30 more cards go toward supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 Wraths, sometimes more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none at all, and I almost always keep to a floor of 38 lands. That way I can always hit my land drops and cast my spells and play commander. So let's talk about our commander. Maelstrom Wanderer is a 7/5 legendary elemental for 5, a green, a blue, and a red, so 8 mana in Temur colors. It says creatures you control have haste, and Cascade, Cascade. Cascade means when you cast a spell, while it's still on the stack, we exile cards from the top of our library until we exile a non-land that costs less than the Wanderer. We can then cast that card without paying its mana cost, and we put the exiled cards on the bottom of our library in a random order, and then we do that again because it has Cascade twice, and only then does the Maelstrom Wanderer resolve. So for 8 mana, we get a commander with big stats and only 7 words of rules text, and it's so worth it. For all its crimes, the Cascade mechanic is sweet. Not only do we get something without paying for it, the fact that we're at the mercy of our own deck is exciting in a way that gets the whole table involved. There's no telling what'll end up on the stack, so our ability to prepare for our future turns is limited, making our game plan nearly as unpredictable for us as it is for our opponents. We're all swept up in the storm together. So this deck goes all in on that chaotic, unexpected, and most importantly, free value. We have more than 25 cards that use mechanics like Cascade and Discover to sling big spells onto the stack and catapult big bodies onto our board. We ramp hard, enjoying some of the wackiness that our deck holds until we get out our commander, and then slam the Wanderer into play to give us a double dose of Cascade. We can hit all but one of the spells in our deck off of our commander, so whether we hit 2 big monsters, or 2 little value pieces, or 1 of each, we're set up to swing in right then. It's easy to gloss over the fact that all our stuff has haste, but that just makes the surprise factor stronger, as we send creatures flying from the top of our library directly into the red zone. But we aren't satisfied with just the freebies printed on our cards. We have some of the usual ways of recurring things, letting us replay our creatures even after they've died, but we also have ways of bouncing those brutes, sending them back to our hand so that we can cast them again and get more of their sweet, sweet triggers. We can even do this at instant speed to protect them, particularly for our commander, avoiding the commander tax and invalidating wraths and removal. It doesn't stop there. Since many of our creatures are gigantic and expensive, we have payoffs for big creatures and bigger spells, more ramp, more damage, and of course more freebies. Since we're able to pull our spells directly out of our library, our suite of card advantage pieces is packed with repeatable draw effects, meaning we're never short on lands to play and things to do. And since our commander already gives our board haste, it's only natural to have effects that also give our creatures trample, so that no one at the table has to wonder if each of our cascades is a good hit. They'll find out soon enough. Playing this deck is like watching a movie with a cyclone in it. It touches down on farmland, and to show how strong the winds are, it picks up livestock for the camera to catch spinning around. This is a moment meant to speak to the danger of what the characters in the movie are facing, but it's become such a common trope that it's now something audiences watch for in any story about devastating storms. I can only imagine the Maelstrom itself including such moments, although we'd see cavern thocters or sprouting thrynexes flying past instead. Our commander is an elemental force of nature, leaving our opponents staring up at the sky, trying their best to prepare for the next huge thing hurtling down at them. Whatever it is, just like being in the movies, When you see cows in a tornado, you know you're in for a good time. You'll enjoy this deck if you like the quick pivots that come in a deck of threats as unstoppable as they are unforeseeable, or if you just want to surrender yourself to the magic gods and let variance decide how tonight's game is going to go. So, as usual, this Moxfield list we're going over today is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of it, you will find a considering section filled with cards that I considered putting in the deck, but ultimately didn't make the cut for me. However, if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, if you have interesting ideas that you want to include in this kind of deck, or if you like what I did and just want to do more of it, that considering section is a great place to start when you build your own Maelstrom Wanderer deck. So we're going to begin with the most important part of our deck, the freebies section. These are cards that give us ways to get free other cards, just the way our commander does. Some of them do Cascade, some of them do Discover, some of them do different things altogether. But we're going to start with Contest of Claws. This is a removal spell. It's 1 and a green for a sorcery that says target creature we control deals damage equal to its power to another target creature. If excess damage was dealt this way, discover X, where X is that excess damage. To discover is sort of like Cascade, but it's a little different because it has a specified number rather than relying on the mana value of the card with Cascade. It says exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card with mana value or with that mana value or less. So we don't have to go less than the way we do with Cascade. It tells us a number and we can go add mana value of that or less. Then we can cast that without paying its mana cost, or unlike Cascade, with Discover, we can put the card we find into our hand. That way, if you find, a removal spell and there's nothing you want to remove, that sort of thing, you can just put it in your hand and cast it later as normal. Then you put the rest on the bottom in a random order, just like Cascade. So Discover is usually linked to cards that are already in play, whereas Cascade is always a cast trigger. Discover has a number associated with it, and we can find a spell that is that mana value or less, as opposed to Cascade, which has to be a lesser mana value than the mana value of the cascading spell. And with Discover, we can put that card in our hand rather than casting it. Because if we cascade into a spell that we can't cast, it just stays in exile and we lose out on it. Which is kind of part of the fun and the charm of it. But yeah, Discover is quote-unquote the fixed Cascade. Anyway, works just as much fun for us, so we're going to use it. Next up is another Discover card. This is Zoyoa's Justice. 1 and a red for an instant that says the owner of target artifact or creature with mana value 1 or greater shuffles it into their library. That could be us. And that's fine if it is, because we don't mind shuffling one of our things into our library. We're just going to cascade into it again later. Then that player discovers X, where X is the artifact or creature's mana value. So we can use this to get rid of something on our opponent's board, and we're taking a gamble that whatever they get from it is not going to be as good as what we got rid of, or we can use it for our own stuff. Either way is fine. Brass's Tunnel Grinder is next. This one's really fun. I don't get to put this in as many decks as I would like to. 2 and a red for a legendary artifact that says when Brass's Tunnel Grinder enters, discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards plus 1. A lot of times in this deck, you end up with a hand full of lands because so many of your spells are getting cast directly from your library. So Brass's Tunnel Grinder is a great way to discard those lands and replace them with something fresh. And at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, descending means if a permanent card was put into your graveyard from anywhere. That means not a token, a permanent card. As long as it went into your graveyard from anywhere, from your hand, from the battlefield, it could be from this discard here, it's fine. So at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, put a boar counter on Brass's Tunnel Grinder. Of course, boar counters don't have an inherent mechanical meaning, they're just used by this card. Then, if there are 3 or more boar counters on it, remove those counters and transform it, and it flips into Tekleton. Tekletlon. Why am I having so much trouble with this? I've said this a million times. Tekletlon. There you go. The Searing Rift. This is a legendary cave land that taps for red. So once we're able to have this happen on our third end step and we get a third boar counter on it, we now have a land that we can use to obviously make mana. So it's a little bit of acceleration for us. In addition, Whenever we cast a permanent spell using mana produced by this land, we discover X, where X is that spell's mana value. So that's even better than Cascade, since it's not lesser than that spell's mana value, it's equal to it. Pretty sweet. Next is Monstrous Vortex, 3 and a green for an enchantment from Modern Horizons 3 that says whenever you cast a creature spell with power 5 or greater, discover X, where X is that spell's mana value. Pretty good. We have a lot of creature spells that are power 5 or greater. Some of them are pretty inexpensive comparatively, so we get a free discover on top of the big creature and whatever it was going to do. Next we have Rashmi, Eternity's Crafter. This is originally from Kaladesh? Yeah, Kaladesh. 2 and a green and a blue for a 2/3 legendary elf druid that says whenever you cast your first spell each turn, reveal the top card of your library. You may cast it without paying its mana cost if it's a spell with lesser mana value. If you don't cast it, put it into your hand. So in a way, it's not quite Cascade, but it's sort of like if you can cascade into the top card of your library, you do. And otherwise, you draw that card. Pretty sweet. Throes of Chaos is next, just a really fun card. This is a card with 2 words of rules text, 3 and a red for a sorcery that has Cascade and Retrace. So it just cascades with mana value 4 whenever we cast it, and then when it's in our graveyard, we can discard a land card from our hand and cast it from the graveyard. So what that means is, we're able to turn every land in our hand into Throes of Chaos by discarding it, paying a red and 3, and we get Throes of Chaos back on the stack, which then cascades again. So this is another way for us to use those lands in our hand and, again, repeatedly turn them into cascades. Unexpected Results is next. I love this card. I had not seen it before this deck, and it's just so cool to me. This is originally from Gatecrash. This is 2, a green and a blue, for a sorcery that says shuffle your library, then reveal the top card. If it's a non-land card, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. Doesn't matter what it costs. And if it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield, does not say tapped, and return Unexpected Results to its owner's hand. So for 4 mana, we shuffle, we look at the top card, and maybe get a land into play untapped. Otherwise, we get a free spell, whatever it may be. And if we get the land, we can cast Unexpected Results again and again and again until we hit something that isn't the land. Really cool. Bigger on the inside, obviously from the Doctor Who sets. This is 3, a green and a red, 3 a red and green I should say, for an aura that enchants an artifact or land. In this deck we usually put it on a land, but we can put it on an artifact. It says Enchanted Permanent has tap, target player adds 2 mana of any one color, the next spell they cast this turn has Cascade. Does not have to be a spell that we use that mana on, notably, in case we have a need to make 2 mana that's red, let's say, but our next spell that we want to cast is a blue spell and we have blue source otherwise. So pretty nice to set us up for repeatable cascades. Next is Bloodbraid Challenger from the Modern Horizons 3 Commander product, I think. Yeah, that's where it came from. 3, a red and a green for a 4/3 Elf Berserker with Cascade and Haste, and Escape for 3, a red and a green. So Escape means while this is in our graveyard, we can pay this cost, same as its casting cost, and exile 3 other cards from our graveyard, maybe some of those lands we've been throwing into it, and we can then cast it from our graveyard. So it'll cascade again. More repeated cascade means more fun for us. Creative Technique. Oh, so cool. This is originally from the Commander 21 product, the Strixhaven Commander decks. I'm just excited about Secrets of Strixhaven, which at time of recording is about to come out. 4 and a red here for a sorcery that says shuffle your library, then reveal cards from the top of it until you reveal a non-land card, exile that card, and put the rest on the bottom in a random order. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. So very similar to Cascade, but it's not it's not limited by the number of the mana cost, by the mana value. So yeah, we just find the first non-land after we shuffle our library, and we can cast it if we want to, for free. Sweet. But Creative Technique has Demonstrate, which means when we cast it, we can copy it, and if we do, we let an opponent also copy it. So that means that the way it works is the opponent we choose, their copy of Creative Technique will resolve first, then our copy, and then our original. So obviously we want to do this. We choose the opponent that we can get the most value out of, either because they're likely to cascade into something small and not worrisome for us, or we say, hey, do you want to be my friend? If you ignore me, or if you don't attack me for the next turn cycle, I'll give you a free spell. And they'll say, sweet, I'll definitely go for that. So use it politically, use it in a way that's strategic for us, whatever we want to do. And by doing that, we get a second copy of Demonstrate, or second instance of Demonstrate on the stack. We get 2 of them. Pretty sweet. Just really fun. Emoti, Celebrant of Bounty, which you don't have to use the Multiverse Legends printing for it, but I just think it looks cool. This is 3, a green, and a blue for a 3/1 legendary Snake Druid with Cascade. Just has Cascade for 5. Gives you a 3/1, not a huge body, but it's fine, because it also gives spells we cast with mana value 6 or greater have Cascade. When you cast something with Cascade, when you cascade into a spell, you're casting it. When you cascade into a spell with Discover, or rather, when you discover into a spell, you're casting it. So it is true, I guess I could have said this at the top of the video, that Cascade lets you cascade into other Cascade spells, which then cascade as well. That's kind of why it's Cascade, other than just sort of flipping cards from the top of the library. So the idea of giving all of our big spells Cascade, even if they already have them, because as you've seen with our commander, spells can have Cascade more than once. Our commander has 2 instances of it. So if Emoti is in play, when we cast Maelstrom Wanderer, it's going to cascade 3 times. 2 times because it's got that printed on it, and a 3rd time because it's got a mana value of 6 or greater. Sweet. Thanks, Emoti. Next up, we have Into the Time Vortex, another Doctor Who card that is sort of like Throes of Chaos. This is 4 and a red for a sorcery with Cascade, but it also has Rebound. So rather than getting to retrace it and just play it over and over by discarding lands, Rebound says, when this resolves, if we cast it from our hand, we exile it. And then at the beginning of our next upkeep, we can cast it from exile for free. So of course we're going to want to. This essentially means we cast this on one turn, the next turn we're going to get to cast it again from exile for free during our upkeep. So doubling 2 cascades over the course of 2 turns. Pretty good. Next is Natural Reclamation. Pretty simple, 4 and a green for an instant with Cascade, destroy target artifact or enchantment. So for 3 more mana, our naturalized cascades at 5. That's pretty good. Finds us some good stuff. It's just straight up removal. If we cascade into this, that's okay, because we're going to get to cascade out of it as well, and we can remove whatever is the most dangerous thing on the battlefield. If someone's got an Engine of Ingenuity, or maybe just even a Meteor Golem, whatever it could be. Maybe you want to kill their Soul Ring if you're that kind of person. Sets up. After that, we have Volcanic Torrent. This is one of our Wraths. 4 and a red with Cascade, for a sorcery with Cascade rather, that says Volcanic Torrent deals X damage to each creature and planeswalker your opponents control. Doesn't hit our own stuff, where X is the number of spells you've cast this turn. This takes advantage of the Cascade mechanic. We cast Volcanic Torrent, it's on the stack, and it cascades. Whenever we find another spell, we cast that as well. Now we've cast 2 spells before Volcanic Torrent has resolved, so we're either going to do 2 damage to each creature and planeswalker our opponent's control, or more if we've cast a spell prior to Volcanic Torrent, if we cascade into something with it that also itself cascades, etc. So this can really add up, and otherwise it's 2 damage to everything, which is still fine. Walk with the Ancestors is sort of our other side of Natural Reclamation. This is 4 and a green for a sorcery that says return up to 1 target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand and discover 4. Discover 4 for a sorcery might as well be Cascade, because it's finding you something that's lesser mana value than 5. However, unlike just Cascade, you can put whatever you find into your hand rather than just casting it right away. So pretty good either way. Aurora Phoenix is next. I love this card. 4 and double red for a 5/3 Flying Phoenix with Cascade. So Cascades for anything mana value 5 or less. And it says whenever we cast a spell with Cascade, we return this card from our graveyard to our hand, so we can cast it again and cascade again. See all the repeatable cascade we're doing? A little bit of an emphasis. Next up is Chameel the Inner Sun, a card that has had its price drop, and I'm glad it has because it's just fun. 6 generic mana for a legendary artifact that means our spells can't be countered. That's excellent. It means not just the spells we're casting from our hand, but the spells we cast from Cascade and Discover and what have you. And at the beginning of your end step, discover 5. So a free discover 5 every turn. Yeah, we're not going to turn that down. Ethereum Horn Sorcerer is next. 4, a blue, and a red for a 3/6 artifact creature, Minotaur Warrior, or Minotaur Wizard Sorcerer. Weird, right? Right? Just seems weird. Anyway, for 1, a blue, and a red, we can bounce it. Just return it to our hand, which is great because it has Cascade. So we Cascade, find something mana value 5 or less, and then whenever we have the mana for it, including after we block something that doesn't trample, we can bounce this to our hand. That blocked creature is still blocked. Then on our next turn, we just cast it again and Cascade again. Kodama of the East Tree. 4 and double green for a 6/6 legendary spirit with reach and with partner. The partner is not relevant in this deck, but nice to see, I guess. It says whenever another permanent we control enters, if it wasn't put onto the battlefield with this ability, you may put a permanent card with equal or lesser mana value from your hand onto the battlefield. This is crazy good. At the very least, this is ramp for us, because we can put lands, since they have a mana value of 0, onto the battlefield, as long as we didn't put a land into play with this. Because, I mean, we can play a land, and that lets us play a second land. We could play a creature, and that lets us play a third land, maybe, or any other permanent that we have that's lesser mana value. This is saying every time we have a permanent enter, put another permanent into play. As long as it's got equal or lesser mana value, you're totally good. Love it. It's not quite the same as cascading into something, free spells, but free permanents out of our hand when we have a lot of solid, repeatable draw effects. Sounds good to me. Rishkar's Expertise is next. 4 and double green for a sorcery that draws cards for us equal to the greatest power among creatures we control. Our commander has an enormous power, it just refills our hand. This is only if our commander's in play, obviously, but we have other creatures that are even bigger. And it lets us cast a spell with mana value 5 or less from our hand without paying its mana cost. Another free spell, not directly off the top of our library, but good enough because we just got a bunch of cards off the top of our library. Seems fun. Sakashima's Protege is next. This is 4 and double blue for a 3/1 shapeshifter with Flash and Cascade. Flash Cascade is a really cool combination because at the very least it means we can flash this in as a blocker and then cascade into something else that might be a creature, and we might be able to block with that as well. However, it also says, because it's Sakashima's Protege, we can have this creature enter as a copy of any permanent that entered this turn. So either we play this on our turn when we've had something really cool come in, we play this on an opponent's turn when they've had something really cool come in that we want to copy, or because the cascaded spell, the spell we cascade into, resolves first, if we find a better creature than anything else on the battlefield, we can have Sakashima's Protege enter as a copy of whatever we cascaded into. So cool. So this just becomes the best creature on the battlefield, no matter what, even if that creature wasn't on the battlefield before we cast Sakashima's Protege. Sweet. Sweet Gum Recluse is a big spider. This is an 0/3 spider for 4 and double green. Why is it an 0/3 for 6? Well, you'll see. It has Flash, it has Cascade, and Reach. And when it enters, we put 3 1/1 counters on each of any number of target creatures that entered this turn. So we can put 3 counters on the Recluse, of course. So it's actually a 3/6. But if we cascade into a creature, or we've cast other creatures or had them enter in other ways prior to the Recluse entering, then all those creatures are going to get 1/1 counters as well. Pretty good. Trumpeting Carnosaur is next. I love this card. 4 and double red for a 7/6 dinosaur with trample. I'm already feeling good. When it enters, we discover 5. Oh, baby. There we go. And for 2 and a red and discard it, it deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. So yeah, this is a removal spell if we need it to be, and we can always recur it from our graveyard in one of our couple of ways, but it's a possibility for sure. Or it's a big creature that when it enters, we discover 5. Cascading into this always feels good. Annoyed Altasaur is next. I use the Double Masters 22 printing because this was in my Double Masters 22 deck at the pre-release, and it's just really fun to cascade in a limited. So 5 and double green for a 6/5 dinosaur with reach, trample, and cascade. That's all you need. 7 mana for a 6/5 reach trample. It attacks and blocks as much as you need it to. It cascades into something pretty huge. Yeah, we're doing great. Next up, from the recent Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles set, it's Raph and Mikey Troublemakers. If you have an interest, check out the video's description to see a deck built with this as the commander. Raph and Mikey Troublemakers is 5 and double Gruul mana, so 5 and double red, 5 and double green, or 5 or red and green, for a 7/7 legendary Mutant Ninja Turtle with trample and haste. 7/7 trample haste for 7 is already good. And whenever it attacks, we reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal a creature card. Doesn't matter what its mana value is. We put that card onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking, and the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. So this is really strong with all of our big creatures. The challenge with this is we are not casting that creature. So that means if we find something with Raph and Mikey that has Cascade, we won't get its Cascade trigger, and that's unfortunate. But we have so many good cards in this deck, the fact that we get something that happens not to have Cascade, that's okay. We'll let Raph and Mikey find it for us, and it's a free thing. Our opponent can block that and just let Raph and Mikey through, which means, sure, we've sacrificed a creature that could have cascaded for us in order to get 7 trampling damage into our opponent, or we found something that's big on its own. For example, if we find Annoyed Altasaur, yeah, it's a 6/5 reach trample that we're attacking with in addition to our 7/7 trample. That's totally fine. The fact that we didn't cascade is unfortunate, but we have, like I said, a lot of different repeatable ways to cascade again and again, so Raph and Mikey is going to help us out. It's going to be fine. Last in the section, we couldn't make this deck without Apex Devastator. It's even more concise than our commander. A 10/10 Chimera Hydra for 10 mana, 8 and double green, with Cascade, 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 Cascade. So this is the biggest creature in our deck, so it can cascade into anything other than our commander, which will be in the command zone. We get to play 4 other spells. For 10 mana, we get 5 spells, one of which is a 10/10 virtual vanilla creature. Yeah. That's great. I don't know what else to say about Apex Devastator. It's just so much fun. We should add flavor text. That covers our freebies section. To round out our game plan, let's take a look at our rebuys. These are cards that let us, like I mentioned before, bounce our freebies, or other cards that we want to be able to get their value from again, back to our hand, so that we can get it again. Starting with Crystal Shard. This is 3 generic mana for an artifact that lets us pay 3 and tap it, or pay a blue and tap it, and return target creature to its owner's hand unless its controller pays 1. So we can use this to interact with our opponent's creatures. We just pay 3 or a single blue and tap the shard, and we'll bounce our opponent's creature unless they pay 1. So if they're tapped out, they can't pay the 1, so it's just a repeatable unsummon effect for us, if we're using blue especially. But it's nice that we have the option to pay 3 if we don't have blue available. Or, really, in this deck, the use for Crystal Shard is to bounce our own things. We play our commander, we get the double cascade, we get all the value from that. Then we pay a blue and tap it to bounce our commander back to our hand. We just choose not to pay the 1. And now we can cast our commander again without any commander tax and get that double cascade again. Or maybe we do that with our Apex Devastator and get that quadruple cascade again. Anyway, this lets us rebuy any of our cards with those freebie effects just for a single mana and tap. Next we have Donatello's Technique. This is a sweet card from the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles set, in that it's just divination. It's 2 and a blue for a sorcery, draw 2 cards. But it has the sneak mechanic attached to it. For a single blue, we can cast it if we also return an unblocked attacker we control to hand during the declare blocker step. That means this is not at sorcery speed, even though it's a sorcery. We are limited to a single step during combat. It's after blockers have been declared, but before combat damage is dealt. That's the only time we're allowed to sneak this in. But if that's the case, and one of our creatures with a sweet effect that we want to get again is attacking and is not blocked, well, then we don't really care about it not doing damage. Its effect is even better. So we pay a single blue, bounce it to our hand, and Donatello's technique goes on the stack, and we draw 2 cards instead of it doing combat damage. Then we have that creature in hand again to be able to cast, and we're all set. In a similar way, also from the TMNT set, we have New Generation's technique. This is Explosive Vegetation, 3 and a green for a sorcery that lets us find 2 basic lands, put them on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. Or we can sneak it in for 2 and a green. Everything I said about Donatello's technique applies here too. We just attack with one of our things we want to get to rebuy its effect, and then bounce it during the declare blocker step if it wasn't blocked. And in addition, for only 3 mana, we've gotten 2 of our basics into play, so that if that creature is something we cascaded into and we didn't have quite enough mana to be able to actually recast it, maybe now we do. Next up, we've already seen Ethereum Horn Sorcerer. I put it in this section just to represent this is sort of what we're doing here, the self-bounce deal with it. But we also have Hullbreaker Horror. This is such a great creature. 5 and double blue for a 7/8 Kraken Horror with flash and that can't be countered. So already scary for your opponents if we play this as a surprise blocker on their turn. But it's even better because whenever we cast a spell, doesn't matter what spell, doesn't matter how, even when we cascade, we choose up to 1. Either return target spell we don't control to its owner's hand, or return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So most of the time, we're not using this first mode, but we can. A spell is, a spell on the stack. So we can't really trigger Hullbreaker Horror unless we're casting something at instant speed anyway. But if we do, we can then use it to remand their spell. That seems pretty good. Most of the time, what we're using this for is bouncing our opponent's permanents. We cast something of ours, it cascades or discovers into something else. Both of those cast triggers are going to let us use the Hullbreaker Horror to bounce things that our opponent has, either a big value piece, a commander, or just blockers that will stop us from attacking. But the reason it's in this section is because it does not say non-land permanent you don't control. So we can bounce our own things with this. We cast one of our creatures with Cascade, it cascades into something else. Any of those castings can trigger Hullbreaker Horror to let us bounce one of our freebie cards that we have in play already back to our hand so that we can recast it again, either that turn or the next turn or whatever. So Hullbreaker Horror as repeatable ways to rebuy our stuff, very strong in this deck. And that covers our Rebuys section. Oh hey, did you just like the video? Thanks. Nice, appreciate that. I'm just kidding, you don't have to like the video if you don't want to. I just appreciate you being here. Anyway, we've got more to talk about. So as much as I want to go to the cards that supplement our game plan, I next want to take us to the cards that support it, these sections of support here, starting with our card advantage section. As usual, I've used the word draw to represent card advantage. It doesn't mean all these cards actually draw us a card, it just means that they give us access to more cards rather than exactly the draw action in Magic. Herd Heirloom is next. 1 and a green for an artifact that if we tap it, we can get a mana of any color that we can only spend on creature spells. So it's a 2 mana rock with a little limitation, but it does give us 1 mana of any color and it comes in untapped. That's pretty good. Or we can tap it, and until end of turn, target creature we control with power 4 or greater, that's quite a few of our creatures, gains trample and curiosity. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we draw a card. So that's why it's in this section. It draws us a card whenever one of our creatures hits. It's nice to be able to use this to ramp our creatures out and then on later turns activate the second ability, especially if we do this after blocks. Because an opponent might say, oh, you've got a big 7/7 or something, I'm going to block that. We'll say, okay, well now it has trample, and when it tramples over, we're also going to get a card. So we kind of use this as a little bit of an onboard trick, and opponents that aren't paying attention are going to get got. Hunter's Talent is next. Love this card. It does so much for us. 1 and a green for a class enchantment, which means it comes in and it has this first ability. At sorcery speed, we can level it up to level 2, and then it gains this text as well. And then we can level it up to level 3 at sorcery speed again for 3 and a green, and now it has all the text on the card. You see. When it first comes in, Target creature we control deals damage equal to its power to target creature we don't control. So it's just a sorcery speed rabid bite. That seems fine. Just solid, especially in a deck that has a 10/10 creature in it. We can kill anything. At level 2, it says whenever we attack, target attacking creature gets +1/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. A little bit of evasion, a little bit of pump, every turn. Seems good. And level 3, at the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. That is not Elemental Bond, but it's like Elemental Bond, I think. Yeah. Am I thinking of Elemental Bond? There's a card that does this. So yeah, so does Hunter's Talent. It's a great way for us to use our mana on turns where we are mostly getting our value from the stuff we already have on board, and we're waiting to cast our next thing or cascade into our next thing. And Hunter's Talent, of course, lets us refill our hand so that we can cast even more things on later turns. Up the Beanstalk is next, banned in Standard at the time, which is still current. Wow, I forgot that Wilds of Eldraine is still in Standard. 1 and a green for an enchantment that says when it enters and whenever you cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, draw a card. So it replaces itself immediately and draws us cards whenever we cast MV5 or greater spells, which, remember, cascading into a spell that's mana value 5 or greater is still casting it. So we cascade into that, put it on the stack, Up the Beanstalk will trigger, and we draw a card as well. Pretty great. We've seen Donatello's technique. It draws us 2 cards. It's just divination, but we can use it to bounce one of our creatures if it's unblocked during the declare blocker step. Eshki Teemer's Roar is just Teemer mana, a green, a blue, and a red, for a 2/2 legendary human warrior that says whenever we cast a creature spell, all it has to be is a creature spell, and all we have to do is cast it. Could be our commander even. Great. We put a 1/1 counter on Eshki. That's already solid. But if that spell's power is 4 or greater, we draw a card, and if it's 6 or greater, Eshki deals damage equal to her power to each opponent, to their power, to each opponent. I don't know Eshki's pronouns. So I want to be clear, this is not 3 different things that any one of them could happen. It's no matter what, if it's a creature spell, Eshki's getting a counter. If it's a creature spell with power 4 or greater, we're also drawing a card. And if that creature's power is 6 or greater, Eshki's getting a counter, we're drawing a card, and then they're dealing damage equal to their power to each opponent. Pretty good. Just a little bit of burn. Garruk's Uprising is next. 2 and a green for an enchantment that does 3 things. It gives all of our creatures trample. That's already solid. When it enters, it checks if we have a creature power 4 or greater, and if we do, we draw a card. It replaces itself. But what if we have creatures that are that big that come in after Garruk's Uprising is in play? Well, whenever we have a creature with power 4 or greater enter, we draw a card. So it keeps rewarding us with more and more cards for our creatures coming in, and all of those creatures are always going to have trample. Great. Kiora Behemoth Beckoner is next. Great for the behemoths in our deck. 2 and a Simic, so 2 and a green or 2 and a blue, for a 7 loyalty Kiora Planeswalker. Love this card. If you play Magic Arena, play this card. She has only hilarious voice lines. Great. She says whenever a creature we control with power 4 or greater enters, draw a card. Same text as the last line on Garruk's Uprising. And -1, untap target permanent. So a lot of the times, this is a great way to attack with a creature and then untap it post-combat so that we can use it to block and sort of simulate vigilance. But even better, she's got 7 loyalty. You can do this all day, and if someone's attacking down your Kiora, fine, they're not attacking you, and we can probably block anyway. The better thing to do with her ability is untap your lands or your mana-producing rocks so that you can use them again. A little bit of acceleration. Kozilek's Unsealing is next. 2 and a blue for an enchantment with Devoid. This is not relevant in our deck, but it might be relevant in someone else's decks. This card doesn't have any color, which means that our opponent can't Pyroblast this. This can't be targeted if you have a spell that says, destroy target blue spell, something like that, or blue enchantment. Yeah. Is that relevant? Not for us, but you never can tell. Devoid doesn't come up that often. However, it says whenever we cast a creature spell with mana value 4, 5, or 6, we make 2 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature tokens with sack this token to make a colorless mana. So this is acceleration for us. We cast our big creatures, anything mana value 4 or greater, or 4, 5, or 6 rather, and we are making 2 tokens that don't require tapping in order to sack for mana. So we can sack them even when they have Summoning Sickness and make more mana. We want to do this as much as we can so that we can accelerate out our commander and our big spells. Plus, they're creature tokens, so we can, block with them if we want. And whenever we cast a creature spell with mana value 7 or greater, we draw 3 cards. Every mana value 7 creature spell that we have comes with a free Ancestral Recall. That seems pretty solid. Next we have Temur Ascendancy. Temur mana, green, a blue, and a red for an enchantment that says creatures we control have haste, just in case our commander's not out. And whenever a creature we control with power 4 or greater enters, we may draw a card. This is, again, the Garruk's Uprising text. It is a may. I guess we don't have to, but we want to. We've seen Rashmi. Rashmi lets us cast a spell off the top, which is a freebie, but if we don't cast it, we can put it in our hand. That's the card advantage. Kogla and Yadaro is next. This is one of our big hits that doesn't give us a free spell. It is 2 double red and double green for a 7/7 legendary ape dinosaur turtle. This is a dinosaur turtle, and this is an ape, Kogla and Yadaro. It says when it enters, we can choose to either give it trample and haste until end of turn, or have it fight a creature we don't control. So it could come with a free removal effect, or it's just a surprise 7/7 trampling attacker. That seems good, like Raph and Mikey. It also has it's not called cycling or channel, but it's like a channel effect. 2, a red and a green, and discard it from our hand. We can destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment, and then we shuffle Kogla and Yadaro into our library from our graveyard and draw a card. So for 4 mana, we discard this and draw and naturalize something. That seems pretty solid. Rishkar's Expertise is the last in this section. We've already seen it. It draws us cards equal to the greatest power among our creatures. As you can see, we have some big creatures, so pretty unlikely to give us just a few cards. Oh, I should also mention, check the video's description if you want to see a Kogla and Yadaro commander deck. Lots of fun. Made that a little while ago. So that is our card advantage section. Let's talk about acceleration now, which we have a lot of in this deck because we need it. We've got big expensive things. Sol Ring is a single mana for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless mana. You've seen this card. You want to play this card. We have big creatures in our deck. Our commander costs 8. Play Sol Ring. Arcane Signet, also an auto-include, and worth it. 2 generic mana for an artifact that makes mana, a mana rock. It taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. Of course, in this deck, that is blue, red, or green. This comes in untapped. It's a 3 mana rock. Yeah, we want it. It's a 2 mana rock that makes all 3 of our colors. There you go. Next, we have Ashling Rekindled. Yet again, check the video's description if you want to see a deck built around Ashling Rekindled. I had a lot of fun building this deck. 1 and a red for a legendary elemental sorcerer from Lorwyn Eclipsed. Ashling is a 1/3. Whenever she enters or transforms into Ashling Rekindled, we can discard a card, and if we do, we draw a card. A little bit of fun. I didn't put this in card advantage because that's not card advantage, but it's just an option for us if we want to do a little bit of rummaging. And at the beginning of our first main phase, we may pay blue, and in this deck, we probably will. If we do, we transform Ashling into Ashling Rhymebound, a 1/3 legendary elemental wizard that says whenever it transforms into Ashling Rhymebound, and at the beginning of our first main phase, we add 2 mana of any one color. We can only use this mana to cast spells with mana value 4 or greater. So this is acceleration on this side. We want to play Ashling and flip her as soon as we can, and at that point, the start of our first main phase, every turn, we're getting 2 free mana that we can use on most of the spells in our deck. That seems terrific. We can also, at that point, choose to flip Ashling back to the front side if we want to get an additional discard and draw. Pretty sweet. Farseek is next. Farseek is our rampant growth for the deck. 1 and a green for a sorcery that lets us search our library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Obviously, what we want to do with this is find one of our many dual-typed lands. Because green is our most prevalent color, but Farseek doesn't say look for a forest. But we can look for a mountain forest, or an island forest. We definitely have those in the deck, and since this is coming in tapped anyway, we have a number of bicycle lands, and those are probably our best hit for it. We also are running Tango lands, or if you wanted to upgrade this deck and put in more powerful dual-typed lands, like Shock lands or Surveil lands, or if you wanted to just run typed duels, like from Dominaria United or the Snow duels from Kaldheim, that's also a good budget possibility. Farseek will find them all. Next is Felwar Stone. This is 2 generic mana for an untapped artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. That means this is not Arcane Signet, unless green, red, and blue are represented among the lands of our opponents, and then it is Arcane Signet. It's exactly what we need. For 2 mana, it gives us a mana that we can use on any generic mana cost, of which we have many. But if one person at the table has lands that make green, then it also makes green for us, and we can use that in lots of different ways. It's also true that if an opponent is running something like, a 5-color land, or a chromatic lantern that gives their lands the ability to tap for any color, Felwar Stone now taps for any color for us. Even if they're running an exotic orchard, now Felwar Stone taps for any color that our lands can tap for, since they have a land that taps for any color our lands can tap for. Really powerful 2-mana rock. We've seen Herd Heirloom. It taps for 1 mana of any color, but we can only use it for creature spells, among other things. Spider Manifestation is from the Spider-Man set, and I really like this card. 1 and Gruul hybrid mana for a 2/2 spider avatar with reach that taps for a red or a green, and whenever we cast a spell of mana value 4 or greater, we untap it. So it doesn't say a creature spell even. So we use this if we're going to cast a spell mana value 4 or greater, so we make the mana and untap it right then when we spend it. Pretty good. Also very creepy, would have looked perfect in Duskmourn. Averna the Chaos Bloom is next. This is a green, a blue, and a red for a 4/2 legendary elemental shaman that says, as you cascade, you may put a land card from among the exiled cards onto the battlefield tapped. Sweet. So basically, if we cascade past any lands, since we can't cast lands off of Cascade, we can take one of those lands and put it tapped onto the battlefield. So every time we cascade, Averna is going to give us a chance, but it is a chance to... I know that sounded ridiculous. Isn't English weird? You just get all these different meanings from different emphases. Anyway, every time we cascade, we have the opportunity, if we find a land, to put that into play tapped. Thanks, Averna. We've seen Brass's Tunnel Grinder. It's in this acceleration section because when we flip it, it's now a land, so it can make mana for us. Gwenna Eyes of Gaia is next. 2 and a green for a 2/3 legendary elf druid scout that we can tap to make 2 mana in any combination of colors, but we can only use it to cast creature spells or activate creature abilities. That's great. It accelerates our creatures. That's what we want to do in this deck. And when we cast a creature spell with power of 5 or greater, we put a 1/1 counter on Gwenna and untap it. So Gwenna is a little bit like our Spider Manifestation, but better. We can use her mana only on creatures, Spider Manifestation only on any spell, but Gwenna can get bigger, Gwenna makes 2 mana, etc. Kiora, we've already talked about. We can use her to untap a mana-producing permanent, like a land or a Felwar Stone or, Spider Manifestation. Kozilek's Unsealing can make us some Eldrazi Spawn, which we can sacrifice for mana. Invasion of Zendikar is one of my very favorite explosive vegetations. This is a siege. A siege is a battle. If you haven't seen battles before, the way this works is it comes in, and you choose an opponent who will protect it. Protecting it means they don't have the ability to attack it, but we can, and so can every other player. From that point, they sort of treat it like it's a planeswalker they have. They don't get to activate its abilities, but if anyone attacks it, they can block to defend it. Which just denies us value. It's the only reason they would do that. And that's fine. It comes in with 3 defense counters on it. And whenever it's attacked, much like a planeswalker losing loyalty when it takes damage in combat, this will lose defense counters. When it loses all of its defense counters, we exile it and we can cast it transformed, and it doesn't have a mana cost, so we just get to cast it for free. We are the only one who can cast it, no matter who defeats it, because we're the one who controls it, even though someone else protects it. A little weird, but it makes sense once you've played it once or twice. Anyway, for 3 and a green, we get a 3 defense siege that says when it enters, we Explosive Vegetation. Search for 2 basic lands, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. That's already solid. A lot of times in this deck, if we've got a big creature out already, we can just play Invasion of Zendikar, go to combat, attack it, and immediately flip it into Awakened Skyclave. This is a 4/4 elemental with vigilance and haste. Important that it has haste because you can tap it for 1 mana of any color, and as long as it's on the battlefield, it's a land in addition to its other types. Not super relevant in our deck, but possible. And if we have anything that cares about us casting things from exile, well, we do cast the Awakened Skyclave from exile when we defeat Evasion of Zendikar. There you go. We've seen New Generation's Technique. It's another Explosive Vegetation that we can sneak in. And then we have the Earth King. I love this card. This is from the Avatar: The Last Airbender set, of course. A 2/2 legendary human noble ally for 3 and a green, that when it enters, it makes a 4/4 green bear creature token. It's Bosco. It says whenever 1 or more creatures we control with power of 4 or greater attack, we ramp in growth for each one of them. We search our library for that many basic lands, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So this just encourages us to attack, which is what we're going to be doing anyway, with our big creatures. We have lots of creatures that are ferocious, power 4 or greater, so we want to attack with them anyway, and at the very least, it comes with Bosco, who's going to start doing that for us the very next turn. Unexpected Results, as we've talked about, lets us shuffle, look at the top card of our library, or reveal it rather, and if we're not casting a free spell, we get to put a land that we find directly into play, not even tapped, and then put Unexpected Results back in our hand so we can do it again. Bigger on the inside, it lets us enchant an artifact or land and make it give it the ability to tap for 2 mana of any one color, and then the next spell we cast this turn has Cascade. Last of all, we have Ground Chuck and Dirtbag. This is another Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles card. 4 double green for an 8/8 Trampler. 6 mana for an 8/8 Trampler. It's a legendary Ox Mole mutant, but I sure do miss you, Colossal Dreadmaw. However, we love this card because it says whenever we tap a land for mana, we add a green. So all of our lands tap for 2 mana, one of which is green. Pretty solid. We've seen all of our ramp cards now. We also have one card that gives us discounts, similar to ramp, but not quite the same thing. Temur Battlecrier is Temur mana, a green, a blue, and a red, for a 4/3 Orc Ranger that says during your turn, spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. This does not discount your spells of power 4 or greater. It discounts all your spells based on the number of creatures you have power 4 or greater. It's easy to misread. So because it itself has 4 power, after it comes in, while it's in play, all of our spells are cheaper by 1. We can get this down quite low. I've definitely cast Maelstrom Wanderer for just Temur mana because I had enough things in play that were big enough that Temur Battlecrier was able to make them small. So yeah, very powerful for us. About 40-ish, I think. Not 40-ish. Quite a few things in this deck will feed into this discount, and then it discounts all of our spells. Especially nice because anything we cast, like Felwar Stone or Soul Ring even, it discounts the generic mana cost, and those only have a generic mana cost, so they are free. So that is the singular card we have in our discounts section. Let's move on to our interaction, which again I've just tagged as a removal here. So it's a red deck, so we're running Lightning Bolt. You gotta run Lightning Bolt. Single red for an instant, deals 3 damage to any target. It's good burn to an opponent. It's good burn to kill a creature, whether outright or after combat damage has been dealt. We can immediately flip Invasion of Zendikar with this. Yeah, love Lightning Bolt. And you don't have to run the Mystical Archive printing, but I do love them. But as has always been true, every Lightning Bolt is a good Lightning Bolt. We're running Contest of Claws. It's a bite effect, so good removal. Hunter's Talent's first level is also a Rabid Bite type thing. So Yoa's Justice lets us tuck a creature or artifact, and then that creature or artifact's controller gets to discover, but maybe we use it for ourselves. Crystal Shard, again, we're not likely to use this on our opponent's stuff as often, but sometimes they're going to tap out, and we can use it to bounce one of their creatures. Imprisoned in the Moon is next. This is 2 and a blue for an aura that enchants a creature, land, or planeswalker, and makes that permanent into a colorless land that taps for colorless mana and has it lose all other card types and abilities. Terrific, terrific card that I'm usually used to shut down someone's commander. Because if it's their commander, they're probably building their deck around it. And now that it's a land, they likely don't have a way to sacrifice it necessarily, or to, since it's not a creature, they can't just block with it and let it die so it can go back to the command zone and they can recast it. Now, we have ramped them because we're really nice since it adds colorless mana, but they either have to find a way to interact with their own lands or find removal for this enchantment, which is less likely to happen than sacrificing creatures, destroying creatures, blocking with creatures, etc. So this is a little bit better than something like Witness Protection. But of course, costs 3 times as much. So Sarkhan's Unsealing is like Kozilek's Unsealing, but the redder version. This is 3 in a red for an enchantment that says whenever we cast a creature spell with power 4, 5, or 6, as opposed to Kozilek's Unsealing, which cares about mana value, this enchantment deals 4 damage to any target. So we can hit anything, hit an opponent, hit a creature, whatever we need. And whenever we cast a creature spell with power 7 or greater, it deals 4 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. So this is our other Wrath. Burning things all the time, burning whatever we want, or maybe everything. Yeah, Sarkhan's Unsealing. I've always thought it's a fun card since I saw it in M19. I'm glad to get to see it. I'm glad it can see play here. Natural Reclamation, we've already talked about. It is 3 more mana so that we can cascade off of our Naturalize. Kogla and Yadaro, we have already seen as well. It is removal for us because it can fight a creature we don't control when it comes in, or we can discard it to naturalize something and then shuffle it into our library and we draw a card. But what about the original Kogla? Kogla, the Titan Ape, is 3 and triple green for a 7/6 legendary ape that when it enters, it fights a creature we don't control, and when it attacks, it destroys an artifact or enchantment defending player controls. So it's got a naturalize on it, it's got a fight effect on it, it's got 7 power. Kogla's a big burly boy that we can also pay 1 and a green into to bounce a human we control to its owner's hand, and Kogla gains indestructible until end of turn. We have 2 humans in the deck. Eshki is one of them, for example. So one thing that's fun is we can use this to give Kogla indestructible, even when we don't care about him having indestructible, we just want to bounce Eshki. We can also, when Kogla enters, with this first ability on the stack, we choose something to fight, but before we fight it, activate Kogla, bounce our human, let's say it's Eshki, and Kogla gains indestructible. So now it fights while indestructible, so we can kill something that we might have lost Kogla to if Kogla had just fought it without it being indestructible. Sweet. Of course, I love the Trumpeting Carnosaur. Gotta love this boy. We can pay 2 in red and discard it from our hand to do 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker. Seems good. Warstorm Surge is next. This is sort of the Big Daddy version of Impact Tremors in a way. It's also kind of like everything gets a bite effect when it enters. Because for 5 and a red, we have an enchantment that says whenever a creature you control enters, it, the creature itself, not Warstorm Surge, deals damage equal to its power to any target. So this is better than a bite because it can hit something other than creatures. It can, of course, hit Invasion of Zendikar or our opponent's faces, whatever we need. Warstorm Surge rewards us for having so many big, high-powered creatures in our deck and being able to play them over and over by just turning them into direct damage from the start. Next we have Dracoseth, Maw of Flames. Love this card. 4 and triple red for a 7/7 legendary dragon with flying. When it attacks, it deals 4 damage to any target and 3 damage to each of up to 2 other targets. This is crazy. I'm going to swing with Dracoseth at my opponent who has no flying and reach blockers. Dracoseth's going to do 4 damage to them from its trigger, lightning bolt 2 other things, maybe the other 2 players, and then 7 damage as well. So it's 11 damage in the air, plus 2 free lightning bolts. Dracoseth is just a lot of value for us, and it's just super fun and annoying. It seems so strong. And it is strong, but it's a 7-mana creature. Is it super strong for a 7-mana creature? Not that much, but we can sure cascade into it and make our opponents nervous, which means it's removal bait. So they're using removal on this rather than something else that might actually be more strong for us. And also, it's just so fun. Like, other than the original Shivan Dragon that I got when I first started playing Magic in '95, like, Dracoseth is just, it's what I think of when I think of a big, scary, fire-breathing dragon, even though it doesn't have fire-breathing technically. Just awesome. Love that they reprinted this in Foundations. Flaming Tyrannosaurus is next. Sure, let's set a dinosaur on fire. 5 and double red for a 5/5 dinosaur with menace. I would find this menacing. That says Paradox. Whenever we cast a spell from anywhere other than our hand, this creature deals 3 damage to any target. So a actual lightning bolt. And then put a 1/1 counter on this creature. That's amazing. This is going to happen every time we cascade into a spell, every time we discover into a spell, even when we flip Invasion of Zendikar, it will trigger the Flaming Tyrannosaurus, make it bigger, lightning bolt something. And when it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. Each opponent? Crazy. And then last, we've seen the Hullbreaker Horror. It lets us bounce, sometimes, spells. We have 3 instants in our deck that we might be able to trigger it with, but most of the time, non-land permanents. So either our opponents to clear the way for us, or to get their value creatures out of the way, or just to tempo them back. Or bouncing our own things so that we can recast them and get their value again by rebuying them. Sweet. Next section is our Wraths. We've seen both of them already. We just saw Sarkon's Sealing, which lets us do 4 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control when we cast a creature spell power 7 or greater. So repeatable. And Volcanic Torrent, which does damage based on the number of spells we've cast by the time this resolves to each of our opponent's creatures and planeswalkers. Those are our Wraths, and that is our support section. Let's go into the supplemental section now, starting with our Payoffs. These are cards that reward us for doing what we were going to do anyway and for the many themes in our deck. For example, we've got a Ferocious theme, cards that are creatures that are power 4 or greater. So Herd Heirloom lets us give one of those creatures trample and curiosity, essentially. Hunter's Talent can draw us cards off of those if we control one of those creatures when we go to our end step. Spider Manifestation cares about our mana value 4 or greater, which lets us untap it. Averna cares about us cascading because it lets us cascade past lands and put one onto the battlefield tapped as we do. Eshki cares about our creature spells in general, but particularly if they're power 4 or greater, or 6 or greater, because then we can respectively draw cards or have her burn our opponents. Gwenna cares about creatures with power 5 or greater creature spells, because they untap her and put a counter on her. Kozilek's Unsealing cares about our mana values of 4 or more. Ronus, the Indomitable, we haven't seen yet. Ronus is 2 and a green for a 5/5 legendary god with Death Touch and Indestructible. Ronus can't block or attack, however, unless we control another creature with power 4 or greater. A lot of the times, we're going to. We've got plenty of ferocious things in this deck, as you are seeing in this section particularly, to make Ronus into something pretty scary. But even if Ronus can't attack or block, we can pay 2 and a green to give one of our other creatures +2/+0 and trample until end of turn. Notably, that can make a creature into power 4 or greater, meaning Ronus can attack or block now. So if we have, let's say, Spider Manifestation and Ronus in play, our opponent might say, Ronus can't block yet, can he? And we'd say, no, not yet. And so they swing in with something. We activate Ronus's ability, making Spider Manifestation into a 4/2, and we say, go to blocks, block with Ronus, our death-touching, indestructible 5/5 god. Good snack. Next up is Monstrous Vortex. We've seen it and how it cares about creature spells power 5 or greater. Sarkon's Unsealing cares about all of our creature spells power 4 or greater. 4/5/6 lets us do damage to any target. Power 7 or greater is damage to every opponent and creature or planeswalker they control. The Earth King Rampant Growths us every time we attack with any number of 4 power creatures or greater, and Rampant Growths us for each of them. Aurora Phoenix lets us put it back in our hand whenever we cascade, and Flaming Tyrannosaurus cares about all of the ways that we cast spells from somewhere other than our hand. Cascade, discover, flipping our battle, whatever we need. So that is our payoff section. We've seen a little bit of our burn already. In fact, we've seen all of it, but we do have this little bit of burn that we can do repeatedly, or both of them, whenever we need to. So Eshki, if we are casting a spell power 6 or greater, will burn each of our opponents based on their power. Sarkon's Unsealing will, as we've just saw, burn anything or everything, depending on the power of the creature spell we're casting. Warstorm Surge burns something based on the power of whatever creature we have enter the battlefield. Drakaseth can burn up to 3 targets whenever we attack with it, and Flaming Tyrannosaurus can burn any target whenever we cast any spell from somewhere other than our hand. Next up is our Evasion section. These are ways to get around our opponent's defenders. Herd Heirloom, we've already seen, gives one of our ferocious creatures trample. Hunter's Talent, and level 2, can give one of our attacking creatures +1/+0 and trample. Garruk's Uprising gives our whole team trample. Ronus can give one of our creatures trample in addition to +2/+0 if we pay 2 and a green. And we have Coma Cosmos Serpent. This is just another big monster, but it's a solid one. 3 and double green and double blue, so 7 mana, for a 6/6 legendary serpent that can't be countered. And at the beginning of each upkeep, we will make a 3/3 blue serpent creature token named Coma's Coil. This does not say at the beginning of each of your upkeeps. So every turn cycle with 3 opponents, we're going to end up with 4 of these serpents. And if we sacrifice a serpent, including these little tokens that we're making, we can either tap a target permanent and its activated abilities can be activated this turn, or Coma gains indestructible until end of turn. This gets used a lot more, but being able to tap something down is evasion. We can tap down blockers so that they're not able to stop us from coming in. Or we can see someone that has cool activated abilities, maybe someone's commander has that, and just tap it down during their upkeep after we've made this serpent, and now they're not going to be able to use it this turn. So that is our Evasion section. Let's look now at our Recursion section. This is different from our Rebuys, because these are ways to get things directly back into our hand without us having to bounce it from the battlefield. So Throes of Chaos lets us cast it from our graveyard. I guess it doesn't get it back into our hand, it gets it back onto the stack by turning our lands essentially into copies of itself. Unexpected Results will put itself back in our hand if we see a land card on the top of our library when we reveal it with it. Bloodbraid Challenger, we can escape it from the graveyard. Walk with Ancestors lets us actually regrow something, returning a permanent from our graveyard to our hand. And Aurora Phoenix lets us lets us put it back into our hand from the graveyard. So since it's coming from the graveyard, I put it in Recursion instead of Rebuys. You get it. That is our Recursion section. We have a Protection section as well. 2 little things that protect us just a little bit. So Crystal Shard can protect us by protecting our creatures, particularly our commander, from having to go back to the command zone and us recasting it for 10 mana or more, by bouncing our creatures when they get targeted with things. It's only 1 creature in the same turn, but we're able to use it once every turn, and we're probably going to want to rebuy those creatures anyway, so it's a good additional use. And Jamil protects us in the sense that it makes all of our spells uncounterable, relevant for us when we don't have control over some of the spells we're casting, since we're cascading into them. That's Protection. We have a Pumps section right here. These are cards that can pump up our other creatures. Hunter's Talent, 2nd level, lets us give trample and +1/+0 to one of our attackers. Ronus lets us give +2/+0 and trample to a creature that we activate this ability and target. And Sweet Gum Recluse puts 3 counters on itself and every other creature that entered the battlefield this turn when it enters. Just a little something. Finally, let's talk about our token generators. We've seen Kozilek's Unsealing, making us some Eldrazi spawn that we can use for ramp. We've seen Earth King, which makes Bosco, the 4/4 bear. And we've seen Coma Cosmos Serpent, which makes these Coma's Coil 3/3 blue serpents. But we haven't seen Coma World Eater, hiding in this last little section as another giant beater. This is the Foundations version of Coma, that also makes those Coma's Coil tokens. This is a 7 mana, 3 and double green and double blue, 8/12 legendary serpent that can't be countered, with trample and ward 4. An 8/12 trample ward 4 that we can cascade into off of our commander. Amazing. And whenever Coma deals combat damage to a player, we make 4 of those Coma's Coil serpent creature tokens. So both of these creatures help each other, essentially. I guess really the original Cosmos Serpent helps the World Eater. But yeah, getting a bunch of little 3/3s, that's a nice set of blockers to go with our enormous monstrosities that are bringing in even more monstrosities. Love it. So just a lot of fun in this deck. That is all of the spells in it. As usual, we're going to go over our land base now, and I've chosen to use original Alara arts for these lands. Obviously, you use whatever you like. We are mostly green and a tiny little bit more red than blue, so we're running 14 basics, 7 forests, 3 islands, 4 mountains. However, this video is going up before Secrets of Strixhaven has released. The Secrets of Strixhaven Commander decks are expected to complete the Bicycle Land and Tango Land cycles, which means we're going to get the Orzhov colored, and relevant for this deck, the Izzet colored or Bicycle and Tango lands. So if you want to do the sort of my idea of the final version of this deck at this time, I would cut either 2 mountains or an island and a mountain and replace them with the Izzet Bicycle and Tango lands. Just because that will keep our numbers of typed lands, lands with basic types, the same, and it won't mess with our math too badly for our mana counts and our mana proportions. So yeah, I wouldn't cut any forests. You sure could cut a forest and maybe a mountain. And I also wouldn't cut 2 islands, or I would prefer to cut 2 mountains. I don't want to cut 2 islands for a reason that will become apparent in our fixing section. But you sure can, just do 1 of each, and that would be totally fine. We're running 2 bicycle lands as it is. We're going to use Rain-Slicked Copse as our example. This is a tapped land with 2 basic types, so it's a dual land. It taps for green or blue because it's a forest and an island, which means we can find this with Farseek. Farseek doesn't say it can find forests, but it does say it can find islands, so we can find this, and now it's going to be on the battlefield tapped anyway, since that's what Farseek does. We're going to be able to have access to more green mana, which is the color of mana we're looking mostly for. Seems good. We can also cycle this for 2 mana, so 2 and discard it from our hand to draw a card, something we might do later on in the game once we've got plenty of mana. Not usually a thing that we do in this deck, but sometimes we've got a handful of lands, we need a little bit of card draw to keep our engine going. Rain-Slicked Copse can cycle, and that's a great way to use it. So we've got that as our blue and green land, and Sheltered Thicket as our red and green land. If you wanted to upgrade these, I recommend the Shock lands. You know, they fulfill a slightly different purpose, and they're much more expensive, but it is an upgrade. We're running all 3 check lands, which is why we care about all of our basic land types. These are much less expensive than some of the alternatives. They are tapped dual lands, unless we control a land of a type corresponding to the colors in it. So if we have a forest or an island already in play, Hinterland Harbor is an untapped dual. So if we have Sheltered Thicket in play, it's a forest, so Hinterland Harbor will see a forest, and it will come in as an untapped tropical island, essentially. So that's why we care about having so many basics. I usually don't run checks, if I can help it, in a deck that has fewer than 18 typed lands, including basics and typed duals. This deck has exactly 18. So cutting basics to add the new Secrets of Strixhaven Bicycle and Tango lands will not change that number, but it's still fine. 18 lands is more than a sixth of your deck, so it's pretty unlikely that these will come in tapped anyway, and unless it's like turn 1 and then you don't mind having a tapped opening land, unless you've got a Sol Ring in hand, for example. So if you wanted to upgrade these, it might be a little more consistent to run the slow lands from Crimson Vow and Midnight Hunt, but they are more expensive than these check lands, and I think the check lands are pretty great. Here are our 5 fixing lands. Of course we're running Command Tower. It has the same text as Arcane Signet. Taps to add 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, so blue, red, or green. It's an untapped tri-land. Of course we're going to run this. Yeah. We also have Exotic Orchard, which is, if Command Tower is the land version of Arcane Signet, Exotic Orchard is the land version of Felwar Stone. Taps to add 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. Both of these lands are untapped lands. They produce at least 1 color of mana. 1 produces 3 guaranteed. Exotic Orchard might produce those same 3, depending on our pod. So yeah, totally worth including. And I put it in every one of my decks that are at least 3 colors. We also have Path of Ancestry, which it enters tapped, but has the same text as Command Tower or Arcane Signet. So it's a tapped tri-land, which is already fine for us. And when we use its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander is just an elemental, we get a scry. So if we use this to cast our commander, it shares a type with itself, obviously, so we get to scry. We also have 2 other elementals in this deck, or 3 other elementals in this deck, I believe. We have 3 other elementals in this deck. So 4 different creatures in this deck, including our commander, will give us a scry. that seems like a nice little benefit for a land that makes all of our colors. We're running Myriad Landscape, which comes in tapped, taps for colorless, and we can also pay 2, tap, and sack it to search our library for up to 2 basic land cards that share a land type. So 2 islands, 2 mountains, or 2 forests. Then put them on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So it's sort of a double rampant growth effect. It's not exactly the same as explosive vegetation because they have to share a land type. And even though we have to pay to sack it to do that, it comes in tapped and those lands come in tapped. This is 1 land drop that becomes 2 lands. So it is acceleration, just slow acceleration, if that makes sense. This is the reason I would like, if possible, not to go below 3 basic islands or 3 basic mountains, if possible. Simply because if we want to use this to get a color we're missing, the color we're likeliest to miss is the one that's least represented, which is our islands. If we've already got 1 island in play and 1 in hand, let's say, or we've milled 1 or had to discard 1 or something like that, Myriad Landscape won't be able to find 2 islands if we only have 1 island in our library. So we want to be able to have at least 3 islands so that we've got 2 left for it to find if we happen to already have had 1 in hand. This is just me hedging my bets, sort of. Which is why I would think that if you have cut 2 mountains, you still have 2 mountains left in your library. And if you haven't, that's okay, because red is more represented in our land base, so you're not going to be as likely to be hurting for it as you would blue. But in most cases, if you've got the ability to already produce red and blue, which this is a pretty solid land base, so you usually will, Myriad Landscape is likely to be looking for forests for you, since it's your most populous color. So yeah, if you want to alternatively run Blighted Woodland instead of Myriad Landscape, it's not a bad alternative. It comes in untapped, makes colorless mana, and can be activated and sacrificed to go find 2 basics that don't have to share a land type, but that activation is 3 and a green rather than 2. So that's the trade-off for it coming in untapped. I would rather be able to use this a little earlier, so that if it's turn 3 and we've got Myriad Landscape in play and we play our 3rd land, we can then crack it immediately and go into turn 4 with 4 lands. I think that's more likely to be useful than on turn 5 when we're activating Blighted Woodland and hoping to accelerate with it then, rather than play some of our more powerful spells or just useful creatures then. But yeah, that's just how I see if you're going to use one of these sort of double fetch lands, you would go. We also have Temple of the False God. Not everyone's favorite card, but in a deck with such big creatures and big spells, its acceleration in your land base, it just doesn't work early on. So this is an untapped land that taps for 2 colorless mana, like Soul Ring, it's a soul land, that we can only activate if we control at least 4 other lands, so 5 or more including itself. So even though this is, again, like Myriad Landscape, slow acceleration, it is acceleration. If your opening hand is Temple of the False God, a basic island, and no other mana sources or ramp, probably you want a mulligan. But if you happen to draw this as your, turn 4 land, that's okay. If you've got other lands, you could probably get this out on turn 5, immediately jump from 4 mana to 6, and you're doing great. We're running all 3 Pain lands because they're just so inexpensive for such a good value. Untapped lands that tap for colorless mana, or tap for 1 of 2 colors, Carplucent Forest for red or green, for example. However, it does damage to us if we tap it for colored mana, which is so worth it. Because if we do this 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times in the course of our game, we've taken a bunch of damage from our land, and that does not sound great. Unless you consider the fact that the only reason we would not tap this for colorless mana is if we really need colored mana, which means we're only tapping it for colored mana because it's the difference between being able to cast a spell or not. That's sort of like saying, is it worth taking 1 damage to cast this spell because the alternative is not casting it? In a way that's like saying, this spell can't be cast unless you pay 1 life. Or this spell needs 1 more mana, are you willing to pay a life to make that mana? In all of those cases, yes, a single point of life is absolutely worth a point of mana. So Of course we're going to do that. And in every case we don't have to, we just use it for colorless. So the pain lands are very strong, especially in a format where you start with 40 life. So yeah, we've got one for each of our 2 color combinations. If you wanted to upgrade these, I would say maybe the pathways are an option. Pathways are not, they're more of a side grade. They're modal double-faced lands that come in and you get to choose to either have it on the green producing side or the blue producing side face up. You know, I like the pathways. I think they're powerful. They are more expensive than the pain lands. I don't know how much of an upgrade they are, but maybe a little bit of one. The scry lands, on the other hand, Temple of Epiphany is our example. This is a tap land that makes one of 2 colors, and it scries immediately when it comes in. So unconditional scry, once it comes in, that sounds great. We get 2 of our colors, yeah. 15 cents, reprinted in Foundations, of course we're gonna run these. Unless you wanna upgrade them to the Surveil lands. Surveil lands are dual typed, they let you surveil instead, they're a lot more expensive. Here are those Tango lands we talked about, Cinderglade and Sodden Verdure. These are lands that are typed duals, like the Bicycle lands, but they don't necessarily come in tapped. They only come in tapped unless we control 2 or more basics. So if we add the Is It Colored Bicycle and Tango lands, this will get worse because we have fewer basics in our library. But the likelihood of us being able to ramp into some basics or just have basics out and then fetch this with Farseek is going to make it come into play tapped anyway, but who knows? Maybe we happen to pull this or cascade past it when we have Averna in play. Yeah. I think that the Tango lands are great. So yeah. If you wanted to upgrade them, again, the Shock lands are probably the way to go with it. We're running Frontier Bivouac. This is our tri-land, comes in tapped, makes all of our colors, so it's a worse version of Path of Ancestry, which is a worse version of our Command Tower, and it's still worth running. We get all of our colors. Great. If you want to upgrade this, Ketria Triome is the card you want. It is the same card, but with 2 differences. It cycles for 3 generic mana, and it has all the basic land types of the colors on it. Finally, here are our utility lands. Bonder's Enclave is first. This is a land that comes in untapped, taps for colorless, or we can pay 3 and tap it to draw a card if we have a ferocious creature in play. Seems great. Extra card draw if we just happen to need it. If we get to the point where we've got good stuff on the board, but we've run out of gas in our hand, our land base can help us out. Demolition Field is next. For the kind of decks that I build, the pods that want them don't want to see land destruction. And that's fair. Not everyone's looking for that in Commander. But Magic is a game of variance and interaction. Our deck is all about variance. We have to have interaction. Sometimes you got to interact with a land. Sometimes someone's playing a Glacial Chasm and we can't do any damage to them. Or they're playing a Rogue's Passage in their Voltron deck and they're slamming into us unblockably. So we want to be able to interact with that land. Demolition Field is the best way we can do that doesn't feel bad. Or so bad, at least. No one likes having their stuff removed. Anyway, this is a untapped land. An untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls. But that opponent then gets to search their library for a basic and put it on the battlefield untapped. And so do we. So both players, we and they, have the same number of lands we had before we activated Demolition Field. No one's down a land, assuming we had basics left in our libraries. But we've gotten rid of the problematic non-basic, we've answered a threat, nobody's lost out on mana production. It's reasonable to interact with someone's threats, and if we're not really blowing up their land base, we're not denying them mana, no one's going to have a problem with this. No one reasonable is going to have a problem with this. All right, Kessig Wolfrun is next. This is a land that comes in untapped, taps for colorless, or we can pay X, a red and a green, and tap it to give target creature +X/+O and trample until end of turn. So X can't be 0, meaning it gets +0/+0, but it just gains trample for essentially 3 mana, a red and a green, and tapping the Wolfrun. So pretty solid. We can also use it to pump up our creatures. Might as well have a little bit of pump, a little bit of evasion in our deck in a land that we can tap for mana the first turn it comes in. Sure. Mosswort Bridge is next. This is a hideaway land. It comes in tapped, taps for green once it's untapped, but when it enters, we look at the top 4 cards of our library, exile 1 face down, and put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So what we want to do is put our best card that we see under the bridge. Then, anytime we have creatures with a total power of 10 or greater, not hard to do in this deck, we can pay a green, tap the bridge, and play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. Which again, it's something being cast from exile, so it'll trigger our Flaming Tyrannosaurus. This is a nice way to sneak in something that our opponents don't expect. Maybe we have a big creature under here, maybe even our Apex Devastator. As long as we've got power 10 or greater among all of our creatures, total power, then we could do this during an opponent's turn. Sneak in an Apex Devastator, quadruple Cascade, drop our 10/10, block. It just sounds like a lot of fun. Finally, I mentioned Rogue's Passage a moment ago. We're running it. An untapped land that taps for colorless, pay 4, tap and pay 4 and tap rather, and target creature can't be blocked this turn. The major use for this in our deck, obviously, is having our big creatures slam in to hopefully end the game for someone, or at least do a bunch of damage to someone. We can use this politically. It doesn't say target creature you control. So we can say to opponent A, look, I know you want to attack opponent B, just swing in. I will use my Rogue's Passage to make your creature unblockable. All I ask is that you leave me alone for a turn cycle. And they might say, okay, that sounds great. Go ahead and activate it. And we'll say, no. You have to attack first, because if we activate our Rogue's Passage before you attack with the creature, you could attack us with it. And then we wouldn't be able to block. And they'll say, oh, that's fair, I suppose. I wasn't going to trick you. And we'll say, we trust you. But you got to play the game the right way. And they would say, yeah. So I'll go to combat, and before blockers, and we'll say, yes, before blockers, we activate Rogue's Passage and make your creature unblockable. We have a good deal. And then we look at each other because we know there can only be one to stand at the end. So that's the political use of Rogue's Passage, but it is also fun to just make someone else's creature unblockable when no one else expects it. Maybe opponent B is attacking opponent A in retribution for last turn, for maybe the last turn cycle. And opponent B goes, I attack you with my 2020, Ancient Imperiosaur. And they say, okay, well, I've got plenty of blockers. And we say, well, before you block, Rogue's Passage, make that Imperiosaur unblockable. And both players are like, wait, what? And now opponent B has just killed opponent A, which is good for us because opponent A was our opponent too. So opponent B is like, oh, wow. So is that how we're doing it? Most people don't think about using Rogue's Passage for someone else's creature without, talking to them about it. But we don't have to make a deal if what we get out of it is another player loses the game. Pretty fun. And that sums it up. Thanks again to Jacob Levy 6576 for requesting this commander, as well as for waiting for me to fit it into my weekly rotation. If you'd like to request a commander deck, and you are the patient sort, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to support what I do here, make sure to like and subscribe, ring the bell if you want to be notified when my videos go live, consider becoming a member of the channel, maybe you get to see my videos early. And remember most of all that magic is fun. You should play more Magic.